All right, so as I briefly mentioned, my lightning talk is going to be about tools for accessibility and education primarily. That's where my main experience is, but how it can extend into the workplace. So to begin with, oh, there we go. Okay, so I just wanted to show, this is me. This is what I look like on paper, right? On LinkedIn, social media, et cetera. I'm 34, first generation college student. I am getting my bachelor's and my master's in information systems. I've held the 4.0 GPA in the graduate program, and I finished my undergraduate 3.99 GPA. I've done some TAing for the accounting department, and then currently a volunteer for Women Who Code. Here's a little bit more about me. Here's the part you don't see on paper. So I'm neurodivergent. I also have PTSD thanks to multiple traumatic situations. Tired a lot. And one of the main things here that you don't see when you see somebody's resume or anything like that is some of these things that I have led to me being burnt out constantly, because a task or a homework assignment that might take somebody, or even me on good days, 2 hours to do, some days would take me anywhere between 6 to 12, depending. And in addition to that, there's been circumstances where I've been in a classroom taking an exam, and I'm sitting next to somebody who's extremely nervous and extremely fidgety. And unfortunately, some of their mannerisms, some of their things have actually set off my PTSD and caused me to have flashbacks in the middle of my tests, dissociate, I lose track of time, that kind of a thing. And then I end up running out of time. So an exam that I normally would have finished earlier, I actually ended up running out of time and not getting the score that I could have gotten. So there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes that was just causing a lot of impact on my health and my mental health, like adding to what I already have. And the biggest thing was I didn't know I qualified for accommodations. In every class that you'll ever take, at least like in a main university, in the syllabus on the bottom, they'll include things like, oh, there's accommodations you can get from the disability center on campus, and they'll have different names and things. But I saw that every class. I never thought I fit the picture of what a disability was for some reason. So in my case, I was extremely lucky that I was working with a therapist at the U who brought up the fact that I did qualify for those. And she's like, did you know that there's tools that could have been helping you along and you qualify for those? And so these are the things that I'm passionate about sharing with anybody now that might receive help from this. And I just want to share some of the tools that I received. I've received multiple accommodations, but these are the main two that made the biggest change for me. The first one is there's this smart pen. So this is just one of many, but this is one I received called the LIVESCRIBE Echo Pen. So it has a camera and a microphone embedded into it, as well as like a really small hard drive. And then you'll see the pen is sitting on top of a notebook. You have to use a specific notebook with it that has these buttons printed on the bottom so that when you tap on them, you can like start recording, you can stop a recording, pause, you can bookmark something. And the whole point of this is that, also the paper has a special pattern that's been printed onto it. And the whole point is I can now take notes in a lecture and not have the circumstance, maybe some of you have had this, the teacher writes the teacher speaks much faster than I can write. And so I would be trying to take really good notes, trying to keep up. And at some point I realized the teacher had moved on to something and I didn't hear it because I was finishing out the thought that I was trying to write. So with this pen, what it does is it syncs up anything I write with what is going on in the classroom, whatever it's recording in the lecture. So now I can just write keywords down related to whatever the teacher is talking about in the moment. After the lecture, I can stop recording and I can actually, with the pen, with that built-in camera, go in and tap on the word that I wrote down, and it'll play whatever was recorded in that moment that I was writing it out. So it's just really nice because I can go back and revisit, a topic the teacher talked about, get the full scope of information that they gave without me having missed out in the middle of the lecture, the ability to soak it in or ask questions or those kind of things. So this smart pen has been incredibly helpful. There are other versions of this kind of thing, like if you have an iPad that you can use an Apple Pencil with. I believe it's it's either GoodNotes or Notability, it may be both now, have included the ability to record audio as well, and it'll sync it up with whatever you're writing. So tools like these are really, really helpful. The next one, so this is called KURZWEIL 3000. Once again, there's many other tools like this, but it's text-to-speech software. This one in particular, the way this works is that you upload any kind of PDF, ebook, anything like that into their engine. It'll run like the analysis on it, and then you can have it read it to you. You can choose different voices, different accents, the different speeds that you want it read to. You can also choose, if you see on this screenshot, the word assume is highlighted, and what that's doing is the orange highlight is telling you this is a paragraph we're reading, and then the green is telling you what word it's on as it's reading to you, so you can read along if that helps. In my case, the way that I've ended up using this a lot is I am a fidgety person, and one of the things is I have to do something with my hands or else my brain doesn't listen for some reason. So this has made it so that instead of struggling with trying to read something over and over again, like 5 times, and not absorbing the information, I can have it read to me, I can listen, I can do something with my hands, I can be like crocheting, sometimes I'll have like silly putty in my hands, whatever it is. Keeps my hands busy, I can listen, I absorb the information a lot better that way. Or sometimes it will actually just follow along and like watch the highlight and read along, and that also helps me absorb the information. The best part is that if I really want to maximize on the tools that I have, there have been moments where I have actually had KURZWEIL read a book or an article aloud to me, and I will be using the smart pen at the same time and writing down the keywords or things that stick out to me as it records what it's being read to me. So I can go back and revisit some things a little bit more easily than having to flip through the book. So these are just a couple of those examples of the tools that I received, the accommodations that I received, that honestly was a night and day difference for me. It made school just so much more approachable and accessible. And I want to share all of this because I guess 2 things. One is I don't want anybody going through a situation and struggling really bad like I did without realizing that they too probably qualify for accommodations. The other reason I wanted to share this is because this does extend into the workplace. I've heard of people, some of the people I know, for example, an open floor plan or an open office workplace is really difficult because there's sounds coming from all over the place, whether it's like copiers, printers, people clicking their pens, conversations all over the place. And if you have a task that, is really important and requires a lot of focus, it's impossible for some people, including myself, to be in a space like that and try to get work done and be efficient. So let me show an example of an accommodation that a workplace could offer for somebody in a situation like that. These are Loops earplugs, and what they do is that they have in the clear sort of the plastic or crystal part of the earplug is that there's a little hole opening. It's like a little sound channel that'll essentially filter out the sound of your environment, and you can customize it. So in the setup that you see in the image here, it's got the silicone insert, and that's like maximum sound filtering. So it'll block out most of the sound of your environment. If you just you don't want to hear anybody or anything, and you just need to buckle down and get work done. If you want to be able to hear if somebody is talking to you or comes up to you and says something, you just pull out that silicone insert, and it'll still reduce your environmental sounds, but it allows you to hear that part. So you don't miss if somebody's trying to talk to you or needs something. So there's things like these I think run about $35, if I believe. There's like cheaper versions on Amazon, but something as simple as this makes a workplace more accessible for people who maybe have a hard time in an open floor plan or some other kind of loud environment. So yeah, I guess I just want to leave everybody with this final thought, which is, if you find yourself struggling in an environment, maybe instead of trying to force yourself to adapt to the environment, find ways for that environment to adapt to you. And that's my lightning talk. Thank you.
Very nice. Awesome work, by the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really great. Thank you for sharing some of what you've experienced as well. Sometimes it's really easy. So I've got a colleague who I work with, and he talks about he has double vision,
Mhm.
and so he has things blown up 200% on his screen all the time, and he's a developer as well. And kind of like back to what you're talking about, we don't always associate accessibility with things that you can't see, things that are happening in the brain or things that are happening in your sensual elements like senses and your ability to consume information.
Yes.
So anyway, like I said, I just really appreciate you going into that. So as we talk about accessibility, I think the biggest thing is the more that we think through and include people and include different techniques in what we're doing as programmers and engineers and designers, I think it makes everybody's life a little bit easier to navigate, right?
Absolutely, and
So,
I think a lot of times too, people are afraid to ask for accommodations in the workplace, just people that I've interacted with, and I think you don't wanna be ostracized, you don't wanna seen as bothering, asking for too much, but I think the part that's missed, and hopefully not missed by their superiors or whatever, but by management is if you help somebody, you give them an accommodation that costs like $35 or whatever, in the big scheme of things is not hard to provide. Um, you will have a much happier and more productive, more efficient employee, less mistakes, all of those kind of things. Like it's worthwhile to find ways for that environment to work for everybody.
hmm. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, that's part of the business case too. Exactly what you just described. It makes sense and it helps. I don't remember the number, but when we talk about business sense, there's something, for example, and maybe I'll just go ahead and jump into my talk because a couple of things I wanted to cover was business case.
Mhm.
As we think about, and okay, so then I'll just jump in. So I am going to be covering a couple of things. So I had planned on going back into the code, but I recently switched jobs, and all of my accessibility code was on my work computer, which I don't have my work computer anymore. So I am going to cover some tools, and we'll get into code as well. But as we talk about accessibility and some of the tools that we're using to test and tools that we're using to actually develop inside of the accessible, create accessibility within our programs. Some of the time, so I'm going to go back to with my work, I kind of gave you a little bit of example of what we talked about earlier, why accessibility was such a conversation at my work inside of the work I was doing. And one of the things came down to number one, we don't we were technically doing it as a negative thing, like we started out being negative thing, like we're going to get sued, so we want to do it. So there's part of it, right? The second part of it was, well, we have like a huge, I think the number's 14% of people, or, and it probably is more because we have 14% of people that we can actually see and measure, but we don't know actually how many people with different types of situations are accessing our site. So the number is 14%. So if we create accessible websites, we're opening an opportunity to 14% of people who are browsing the internet to now be able to browse our site and purchase or engage one way or another. But it's probably bigger than that, which that's a huge, huge number. The third thing is if we're building for accessibility, something that as a side effect of building for accessibility is search engine optimization. And that all by itself has a long tail effect that from a search engine perspective, I mean, there's not any way to measure it when it really comes down to it, because sometimes we're measuring actual search engine optimization. We're paying attention to organic click-throughs to our site, but we can't say if it's coming because of the accessibility that we've built in or because of the search engine optimization. So that's a little bit of a gray area as far as to be able to like hardcore give you numbers as far as how much more money you're going to make as a business because of this. But it's a side effect and it lasts for a long, long time. I've done SEO work for a lot of years, and what's interesting is when I first started developing accessible components, I saw the correlation. And of course, that was one of my arguments. Like, well, we're building for accessibility. And guess what? It's going to make a difference long tail because of that search engine component. the optimization component that you just build in with everything that you're doing for accessibility. And still, that's still such a small part of accessibility inside of the code. But those are the three biggest use cases or biggest business cases. So as you're going back to your job or having those conversations with people who can sign off on the dotted line, yes, we're going to approve the budget to build, for you to take a little bit extra time and build these features accessible rich. There's those things that you can go back to them. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll start showing a couple of tools. So I've got a plant website up right now, and let's see, hopefully you guys can all see it okay. There we go, my little bar's in the way. Okay, so a couple of tools that I started using that I really like, and I'll go through like tools in general. So if I can't see, for example, or I have issues, I can't see very well, things aren't clear, or whatever it is, there's something going on with my vision. I can still hear and I can still navigate with my hands, but I can't see. The biggest thing that people are looking for is some sort of screen reader. I don't have that tool pulled up on my machine because I'm actually very bad at it. I don't. It goes back to I wish I had a really close friend that knew how to use those screen readers, and then they would teach me how to do it. But I haven't fully learned how to use the screen reader, so I don't have that pulled up. But Macs there's a default tool inside of a Mac that has the default screen reader in it, and then there's a few different extensions and programs that you can purchase on a Mac as well as on a PC to be able to screen read. So with that being said, that's one tool, and that's just, like I said, a built-in tool that will make a difference. As far as the testing goes, you've got your manual testing, which are things like a screen reader, and then you've got your automated testing. I have a couple of them that I've got pulled up on my screen right now. One of them's the DevTools. It's the Axe DevTools, and this is just an extension. It's a free extension that I can install on Chrome. And basically I activate the extension and hit scan. And what happens is it's going to go through and give me a list of issues and why it's an issue on this particular website. So if I'm working on my own website, I can go through and see it and actually be able to go back in and take the recommendation, learn what it is, and then make those adjustments in my code. So right here, what I did, let me just see. Let's rerun this. That it will analyze the page. It basically goes through the code. And so on this one, I've got 22 automatic issues. There's 11 critical issues and 11 serious issues. If I start to scroll down, elements must only use ARIA attributes. Elements must meet minimum color contrast thresholds. Anyway, it gives me some ideas of what's going on. So if I were to go into this one, for example, I see my different issues. It gives me the element name. It gives me what's happening here. And then it tells me, oh, wait a minute, we're only at a color contrast of 4.42. So what I can do is I can, as a developer, I can go into something like, I'll just pull up this as an example. This is a color contrast checker, and there's a ratio. And I can see if the color contrast. So if I were to go in and put, like, let's do a, that's not what I wanted. Then I've got my contrast at 1.24. So that's basically you're shooting for a 5. You want a color contrast of 5 or more. That means it's going to contrast. And what happens is if I can't see very well or I need that contrast, or for example, if I'm colorblind or mildly colorblind, I need to be able to see what's going on. So for example, on this site, that's one of the things. And even with a 4.42, it's not like it's the most critical thing, but at the same time, you will get dinged for having not good enough color contrast, and you will get rewarded for having a better color contrast. And this kind of goes back into that SEO component that we talked about earlier. Not that you have to have SEO, but if you have it, you get points because you're paying attention to more of your audience. So anyway, this would be a place, so it gives you all of the detail that you need to be able to go in and adjust that inside of your code. So we'll go to another one, same thing there. So this one's a 2.39. And this is an example of small wins. These are some of the smaller things that you can adjust for. Let's go into this ARIA attributes. Let's see if I can identify what's happening. So this one says it's not even allowed. So ARIA expanded false, it's not even allowed here. And ARIA is a labeling mechanism that helps people navigate when maybe they can see, but they have limited mobility issues with their hands and they've got to use just a keyboard. So if you practice going through any website without using your mouse, those ARIA attributes make a huge difference for as I'm clicking through with my tab and hitting enter to go to the next link. And there's a lot more to cover in there, but that's a very short version of that. Okay, so then let's see if there's any other interesting ones. So there's another one with ARIA labels and IDs where we've got some duplication here. And select element must have an accessible name. So anyway, these are, as I go through and talk about this tool, like I said, I wanted to give a really brief overview on that. I'm going to go through and do the same thing on Lighthouse for a second. We're going to actually jump over to Target. We'll go, oops, inspect. And now I'm going to run a Lighthouse report. Actually, let's go back. I may not be able to. We'll go here. Okay, so I'm going to analyze this page and it gives me, so this is just like I said, this is Lighthouse. It's the same thing we use to test speed on like Google Speed or on, performance for performance issues. So I can use this for performance, for SEO, if I have a PWA, but I can use it for accessibility and I can look at the mobile and desktop versions and I can look at a handful of different things as far as for the mode goes. So we're just going to leave it on this default navigation. We'll put it on mobile. Actually, let's put it on desktop. And we're going to take away all of these bits here. We're just going to say, I just want to scan it for accessibility. And we're going to analyze the page load here. We ran into an issue. We ran into an error. So it looks like Target can do some work on their accessibility. Just give it a little bit longer. We'll give it a second longer. So, as we were talking about some of the testing tools and I was talking about some of the manual tests, so with the project that I just came off of, we started out on one of the web pages that I was working on. And basically what I ended up doing is I took a snapshot of the entire website, all of the different pages, and I went through and I ran these very automated tests to see where the accessibility issues were on each page. And I was able to get some numbers, which are some KPIs that say I can make it better. So on one of the pages that I was looking at, which was the home page for this site, my looks like maybe it's not going to be able to give us a full information here. But anyway, on the home page of the site, there was 157 issues on our ACT. So we just actually talked about the numbers. So there was 157 issues on ACTs. And my accessibility score on Lighthouse was, I think it was in the like 41 or something like that, which is definitely an F. Lighthouse scores on 0 to 100. So if you have an accessibility score over 90, it says you're green, you're good to go. But if you have a score that's like 41 or 47 or whatever it was on that homepage of the site I was working on, that was definitely an F. It's bad. So I have 157 errors that I can go back through and track which ones are which, and I have a solid plan to be able to go through and address those issues one at a time. And then my accessibility score on Lighthouse, I can just shoot for, because as I start fixing those issues, the score goes up. So the last time I checked those numbers, we were down to 12 issues on the site, and we were at a 93% accessibility score. Now, when I talk about the difference between automated testing, kind of like we're talking about here with these tools, versus manual testing, what happens is if you're paying attention and you can get a really good, really great scoring from here, the manual testing is still really important, but you're still getting a home run if you're making sure that these automated tests are coming in with good scores. And like I said, it's still really good to go the other direction, but you still make a lot of progress if you don't end up doing the manual, or if you wait till towards the end, because once you start doing that manual testing, you'll identify even more issues. So if you can get a broad swath of them automated, it does help a lot with the time. So let's see, I'm trying to think of why it's not, oh, there's a lighthouse. It actually opened it in a new page. We'll look at that in just a second. It says it's warming up here. Let's go ahead and just cancel that. I didn't realize it opened it up in a new page. So you can kind of see we've got our performance is low. It says it's 100 accessibility wise. We're hitting best practices, and we've got 100 on our SEO. So we're slow, but some of the other pieces are doing really, really well. And if you haven't used this Lighthouse tool, I definitely recommend using the Lighthouse tool, just because it's so handy. So then we go back to some of these other issues, which are also really helpful from a development perspective. Okay, so let me jump back into here for a quick second and see if there was anything else I wanted to cover. We talked about Axe, Lighthouse, contrasting, doing some manual testing, and the last thing I wanted to talk about is this, the WCAG overview. So this right here is guidelines, and I only bring this up because there is a huge amount of documentation on what's right and what's best and what needs to be paid attention to. A lot of times in the software engineering world, we have so many things that are crashing down on our ability to program and do our job. We have business requirements, we have budget, we have time, we have bugs that are popping into our, we need to go fix them. We have things that we just need to handle. Because accessibility hasn't been a huge focal point for a lot of developers, and even in school, like when I was in school, it wasn't covered in detail. So I didn't learn in school how to develop for accessibility. It just wasn't a focus. Because of all of this stuff that's happening, accessibility gets pushed to the background, and people, it's just not an important thing for so many people, and especially businesses who don't pay attention to it. They're like, I don't want to spend the budget on that. It sounds ridiculous. So one of the things that, and I told you in the very beginning, one of the things that I went to my business was I gave them those business cases. I talked about the ability to not get sued. I talked about the ability to give more people access to our site and our content. And then I talked about the long tail effects. There's a lot more benefits that you can really go back to your business with, but those were the ones that I went through, which basically gave me the leeway to start developing. Now, as I was learning, and I'm going through, I'm going to just pull out some of these things. As you're learning some of these pieces and the different elements, and you're learning how to adjust them, I definitely spent a lot of time on this guidelines website as I'm going through and learning it. There's so much information on here that you're never going to be able to consume it before they change it again. So my recommendation is to take time as you're developing, use those automated tools, reference the WCAG guidelines as you're learning, and do the best you can to understand and get a really good foundation of how to develop. And I think the biggest thing is just slow down, and you will speed up when it comes to developing for accessibility. So with that being said, I will go ahead and finish my presentation. Hopefully that was really helpful for you guys, and let's go ahead and turn the time over to Q&A. And I would love to hear, Sam, we haven't heard your voice quite on the call yet, but I'd love to hear any additional thoughts that you guys would add to this conversation, as well as any Q&A that you guys had. Okay, so Connor, I'm going to go ahead. You said, how do you think Axe DevTools compares with Google Lighthouse? That's actually a really great question, and that's part of the reason I brought both of them up. Lighthouse is a more general tool, and it gives me a score. And this goes back to if I'm okay, so I'll give you what happened in my space. My boss, as I'm giving him the reasons on why we want to develop accessible websites. He says, I don't really, how do we measure it? How do I pay attention to that? Because I don't know how to test and I'm not going to spend the time testing. So for me as a developer, I go and I give him some numbers. I have to give him something that he can attach to an ROI. He has to be able to attach them KPI wise and then report on the progress. So from a very practical perspective, Lighthouse Reports gives me numbers, just like I was showing you on that target report where it said 45 performance, 100% accessibility, 100% SEO. I know that I don't need to do a lot of improvements in those areas, but it still gives me a number. So when you go and start running it on your websites, you can start attaching a number and basically measuring progress. And so that's with Google Lighthouse. It gives you a score, and there's nothing better than going to your higher ups and saying, "Hey, by the way, we've got an F." Right? We have scored an F. Google is giving us an F.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden the business says, oh, that's bad. We want Google to like us and give us better scores, right? So that's Lighthouse for you. And Lighthouse will still give you a list of things to fix with the accessibility. It wasn't on that one because they had such a great score, but it will still give you that scoring. And then as far as Axe goes, I like Axe because it gives the very specific, like that Axe made it so when I was very first developing and starting to build the accessibility in, Axe made it so it was really simple for me to start dissecting and understanding where to start. And I've still got a number, 157 down to 13 or whatever the numbers are. Every website's going to have different issues. Some are going to have more if you have a lot of menus. You're going to have a lot of other issues. Anyway, there's all kinds of different things to pay attention to, but it still goes back to numbers. And so as I was doing my reporting to my higher ups, the biggest thing I wanted to do was identify, here's our starting points with these 2 automated testing apps. And here's the progress. And over the year and a half that I worked on these projects, every so often I would go in and run the reports and be able to say, hey, we're down to 45 errors now after I did X, Y, Z, and I've spent 20 hours doing that or whatever it was. I'd be able to positively report that we're making progress. And of course, we're not an F anymore. Now we've got a C. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've used Lighthouse a little bit, and one thing, yeah, I did note that they do recommend like additional like manual testing at like the end of their little thing. I have noticed there's some things that are like false positives or false passes, like alt tags. An empty string can be a existing alt tag, and that just that'll pass on. So you got to be careful, of course. But
Yep.
what was I going to say? Where was I going with that? Oh, one thing I really like about Lighthouse is the read more, like all the things that they break down. Their documentation, I feel, is really good in terms of like explaining really in depth, but on like a really accessible level. Just like, so if you have no idea what this stuff is, what any of like the context of this issue is, you can go in and learn it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I actually would totally 100% back that up. And it goes back to as you're learning these pieces, all of that stuff makes such a huge difference because why do I need to pay attention to that? Especially, coming from a perspective that I don't need the accessibility my personal self. I want to understand so desperately. I want to understand what other people are experiencing so that I can make sure that I'm doing my best to give them the best experience I can. So all of the documentation, like it makes such a huge difference for me to understand better what other people are experiencing and how I can do a better job making sure or that I can do my best work, making sure everybody has what they need. And that's something that's always been important to me. So cool. Anything else? And Michelle, you said the same thing that I was saying. Accessibility wasn't covered.
Not at all.
Just
Like, I think the closest we've ever gotten to talking about accessibility is, make sure there's some contrast in their colors. But it wasn't even with that in mind. It was just like, don't make your website ugly.
right.
Yeah, that's it. That's as far as it's gone. So honestly, for me, even just seeing these tools, I'm thinking, wow, I wish I would have known about these. And I'm even thinking like my own portfolio website and you know, I have the student perspective, but yeah, it's just crazy to me that it's not even talked about.
Yeah, yeah. And that kind of goes back to show that we still have a lot of work to do. And I think that there's a lot of work that's being done. Part of it's from the governance side, which, like I said, it's that negative incentive. You don't want to get sued, but at the same time, sometimes businesses need that as a swift kick in the pants to move forward with something that they should be doing anyway. But because it hasn't been a huge issue, we have that catch 22. Which one do we start with? And this goes back to education. So a month ago, we had a gal from Luxembourg. Her name's Stephanie. She came in and did a presentation strictly from the design and documentation side. And she shed a whole lot of light as far as from the very early phase of creating a website or creating a product that you're going to give users, right? Whether it's an app or a website or whatever it is. She gave from a design perspective, because she's done a lot of study and a lot of work on, because she's a designer, she's done a lot of work on what it takes to do a good job designing. And what she'll do is she'll create in Figma, the tool that she uses to do the designs, the very specific documentation as far as here's the element that you're creating and here's why, and here's the function and here's why, so that when she actually turns that design over to a development team, they already know, like, oh, it's spec'd out, the requirements are already there, and then they don't even have to think twice about it. It's just part of the requirements. But I think that that's not the first step. Like, I think it's everybody needs to do their part to build what they can, to learn what they can, and do what they can to make it better. So anyway, I thought that was really great, and I feel like the conversations that we've had as a group have been really helpful for everybody who's participated. So okay, well, let's go ahead around the room real quick. I'd just love to hear like one snippet that you're going to take home with you today or into your development work, that's going to help you be a better developer. And I'm going to start with you, Lloyd, and then we'll see if we can get Sam on for audio. But Lloyd, go ahead and give us one snippet that you're taking into your work to help you be a more inclusive developer.
Yeah, well, I particularly appreciated Michelle's perspective because I actually have an attention deficit disorder. You don't really think of it as a disability, but I'm like, I really don't like real crowded websites that have a lot of different things going on at once, stuff like that. So I'm definitely going to be, I actually like that LIVESCRIBE too. That looks so cool. So I'll probably give that a try.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Lloyd, for sharing your thoughts and what was exciting for you. And it's funny, I don't think I have ADD, but I still wear my Pro Buds all the time to help me so I can focus. And when I lose focus, it takes me a while to get back on. So, hearing that from you too, just as a kind of a follow-up from what Lloyd was just saying, I'm like, maybe I do have a level of ADD, and that's how I've solved it without paying too much attention to it anyway. So thanks for calling that out. Sam, can we get you on for audio, and let's hear your one snippet of what you appreciated? And if we can't, that's okay too. I think we're not going to get Sam. That's okay. Connor, what's one piece that you're excited to take forward into your work?
I think kind of connecting some of the theory that we talk about in terms of like inclusive design and accessible technology, with kind of the real world, with the voices that y'all have shared. I think we talk about inclusion, and honestly, like, so I think that inclusion, right, is the only way that we can like create solutions for everybody is by including people in those processes. And so that's why it's been so great to actually hear from some women today, honestly. And it also brings like the LIVESCRIBE again. Yeah, that I thought was like, oh, that's so cool. And I don't identify as ADD yet. Not yet.
We're all on a spectrum.
Yeah, I know, that's a thing. That's what I'm learning. But it really is like this, like the idea of, yeah, like this accommodation for you in this case, can be applied universally. It's like this tool, these tools that we're designing for, maybe selective population, but can be used by everybody. It's just like the curb cut all over again, where you gotta have the inclusion, and you gotta be able to share. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Connor. Michelle, what's one thing that you're taking with you into your day-to-day for accessibility?
Honestly, for me, just the knowledge of the Act stuff tools and Google Lighthouse, I had no idea. And for me, as we're talking about ADD, and it's like, everyone has a little bit of everything, as I've learned. It's just, where are you on the spectrum? And
Uh-huh.
so, yeah, sometimes paying attention is difficult. Sometimes you have to receive info in a certain way. So for me, like, just seeing those numbers to begin with is like, okay, that gives me, instead of just looking at my website and being clueless of where to start, that gives me an idea of like, how am I doing in the first place? And then what are the individual things with Axe tools that, what can I work on? For me, it's just, I'm excited to like dive into my own portfolio website or whatever and see what I can fix. So
Yeah.
definitely that's what I'm taking away. I did want to respond some of the things that, you guys have already been talking about. With CC, that's actually one of the ways I realized that noise was an issue for me, was that, so I wear usually like the over-the-ear headphones. And part of the reason I switched to those is because they are noise canceling without, sometimes my ears isn't like something, well, I should say, I've learned that having earphones that go all the way in, playing music, my hearing doesn't like that too much, but just for noise canceling, I like it. But I would realize with these headphones, half of the day I kept them on and I wasn't listening to anything, and I didn't even realize it. And it was because it was lowering the volume of everything. And I was like, okay, apparently this is something that helps me focus. So yeah, I was doing that. I was doing the same thing. And a couple of things that I forgot to mention too was part of that is like, for me personally, and I think this is a lot of people with ADD, is that it takes a lot of work just to get started on the task in the first place, because your brain's gone like all over the place, and it's physical work, like mental physical work, to get it to go, okay, we're working on this task. And if you have something that throws you off and distracts you, you got to start that all over again and get back into that zone. So anything like that you can do is is helpful, so that, one, like I said, you're doing the best work you can, but you feel good about it, and you're not tearing yourself apart just to try to like fit in and get things done the way that is expected of you or whatever. I did also want to mention the LIVESCRIBE thing, the pen. I did forget to mention a couple of things about that. One was that you can connect the pen to your computer after the fact, so you don't have to always look at your notebook for the notes. It'll translate your notes into like a digital format. It'll turn it into a PDF because it's recorded visually, like you writing down things. And so then in that PDF, you can still click on words or whatever, and it'll play whatever audio recorded in that moment. So you can interact with it, whether you want more analog format or on your computer. Yeah. And the thing is too, as you can tell, I get fired up about this. You can buy this for yourself. If somebody doesn't want to pay for accommodations, get it for yourself. That's the most important thing, is that there are things out there. I've interacted with so many students. Some had like brain injuries from really bad accidents they had, and they're either embarrassed or they think they don't deserve accommodations, and yet they're spending 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, trying to just get this one reading done. And those kind of things just break my heart. So it's like, there's tools, look for them, use them, don't feel bad. Like, everyone deserves help. So
Yeah.
I get off my soapbox now.
I actually really appreciate you going on your soapbox, because everybody's so different, right? Everybody's so different. And I think the biggest thing is, like I was saying, I don't identify as a disabled person, but at the same time, like as I'm talking about, it's funny you said the AirPods or earbuds or whatever. At work, so when I'm actually go into the office, I'll have my noise canceling ones on there, and then I actually have a second set that go on, and I don't listen to music. Music is so bad for me. So I have the second set so people they know that I can't hear them, because for a while I just had the little ones and people couldn't see them. They start talking to me randomly and I'm just plugging along working, and it probably looks like I'm just totally ignoring them. So I'd put the big ones on so people knew that I couldn't hear them.
That's a
Anyway,
good
so
idea.
even though I don't identify that way, I have to make accommodations, and the biggest thing is I listen to what I need as a human doing my work, and I try and find ways to simplify or to speed up or to make my job easier, to help me understand something more clearly. And I think that's the biggest thing is, as you guys are going through in your day-to-day work, same thing goes. You know, whatever you need is valid, and you're valued inside of the bigger picture of all the things. So do what you need to do for yourself to make all of the work easier. Anyway, with that being said, let's go ahead and wrap up our call. I appreciate you guys for showing up today. I feel like I've learned a lot as far as it goes to, you know, my own needs, and learning about different ways of asking for different types of devices. And I might actually get one of those pens just for the heck of it, because it looks really cool. And maybe it will help me. So anyway, I really appreciate everybody's contribution to our conversation today. Reach out if you have any other questions, either on Meetup or I think that's probably the best way to get us. We also do have a Slack channel. We have lots of different people on there. Michelle, maybe do you have? Let me see if I got it.
I'm gonna see if I can get that invite link for it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I shut my Slack down. It just started pinging to me, like
Yeah.
every single, like all of a sudden it just started going off. I'm like, I hope that you guys can't hear that, because it was really distracting for me. But I ended up just shutting it off. But anyway, either way, and let's just go ahead and post that link in that meetup. So if you guys want to hop on to the Slack channel, feel free and welcome to. Oh, there we go. We are a very inclusive community, so even though we are women who code, we like all people. It doesn't matter what gender you are or how you identify. We just like people, and we're here to make the world a better place. So anyway, with that being said, over and out. You guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you another time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, guys.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, bye-bye.